Hi, good morning, Leemei. How are you today?
Hi, Simon. Yeah, I'm good. Good morning.
Excellent, excellent. Well, this is our second podcast in our series where we're looking at careers and how people get ahead in their career and be successful in what they do.
Hmm.
Just to recap, last week we talked about what was it like getting your first job as a graduate, how you found your way in the workplace, and so this week we'll advance it a bit and work on the basis that you've been working now for a few years, and then you're trying to work out what you need to do next in your career.
Hmm.
So let me go straight in with the first question. So,
Sure.
um, given that you come from, worked in both Asian and Western companies, what do you see as the relative advantages of a flexible, less hierarchical work environment?
Right. Okay. So when we looked at hierarchical environment, I think some of the advantages, such as, like some people, for example, depending on how or what sort of background, education background the person is from, so hierarchical environment will suit this group of people because normally, you are told sort of like you are told like what to do, right? So there's like a very written, like formal procedures that this is how you do it, and then this is how the culture is, right? So you basically kind of take the orders from the top. And then you execute it. So for some people, this is the environment that is it's good in a way where you just kind of execute it, and then you know that you will not go wrong as long as you kind of follow the rules. I guess another thing is that things can be executed in a quicker way, um, because you just have to kind of you're responsible, to kind of do what you're told, and then you know that the expectation or the result will be okay, what is said, right? What you're told. So I think in that way you perhaps it's more efficient. So I guess that's what I kind of feel when I was in that sort of environment. I'm not sure if you do you have a different view on this?
No, I pretty much agree with you that in a hierarchical environment, it's the criteria for success is very clear. It's follow
Mm,
this procedure if something happens, and yeah, it works if there are really good procedures and processes in place. I think
yeah.
sometimes where it falls down is if something deviates from the norm,
Mm,
have you got a roadmap to follow? If
hmm.
not, you're then left in a situation where you have to make a decision, and if you get it wrong, you know you're going to be in trouble. But
Yeah.
nobody from the hierarchy above you has said, what happens now? Yeah, at that point, you do what you normally do. Is you would escalate it to your line manager, and then they take the responsibility to find a solution.
Yeah.
And I think, but what it can do sometimes is, it can stifle creativity, it can stifle initiative, which can be sometimes that can be the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, on that point where, about creativity, I think, people may feel a bit restricted because, you just kind of follow the procedure, right? And then if you don't really agree to it, if you're not 100% agreeing to it, so it's like it feels like you're forced, to do in that way. You may have like other ideas, but you still have to follow, what has been laid out for you. So I think, yeah, so that kind of, give a little bit of this restrictions in terms of yeah, promoting creativity and innovation.
Okay, and it kind of in terms of what would you see kind of in a couple of points as the positives and
Mm,
benefits of a flexible work environment?
mm. Now, when we looked at flexible working environment, my experience is that I think it really encourages collaboration because you feel like you are in the environment where you are pretty much, influenced by working in a team sort of setting. So you need to be your participate. I mean, one's participation is very important. So I think that basically kind of help to cultivate the culture of collaboration, which is very important these days. Secondly, I think the flexible working environment also gives the opportunity for individuals to be creative. I think, it's sort of like the opposite of, the more structured kind of organizations, right? So yeah, so you have that um, freedom to be creative. You feel more empowered to kind of voice out your ideas. So you may not agree to one way of doing things. So I think that sort of environment basically kind of encourages individuals to say, hey, perhaps we can have option 2 or 3. Let's kind of look at them, right? So in the end, it's more sort of like out of the box kind of thinking, I would say. Now,
Okay.
thirdly, yeah, and I think the other point is really, I guess, in a more flexible um, working environment, it encourages communication. So, which is really important these days to have like, um, better communications with teams or stakeholders and all that. So I think individuals are more empowered to kind of speak up, to really voice out what they think and what they feel. So it encourages that sort of environment, which I think um, basically at the end of the day, the organization will be almost like on a ongoing type of uh, operations where you kind of strive for, getting better.
Okay, I understand that. Is there any Are there any particular, could you associate a particular challenge with being in a flexible environment, or do you feel that the positives just tend to help challenges resolve themselves?
um, Challenge in the flexible working environment. Now, so I had been in both environments. So, at first it was structural, and then when I first moved to the flexible one, I think I was, yeah, I think it was. I wouldn't say a shock. Yeah, perhaps, a shock or like a surprise that, hey, I never used to work in this sort of environment. How am I supposed to react, right? So it's really kind of taking the clues of how your team members react or how they kind of bring themselves at work or how do they kind of come across when they talk to other people. I think, so it was really a learning curve for me. So I think one of the challenges back then was I felt, oh, I now have, I had to basically kind of voice out a little bit more or give my ideas. So that is
Okay.
what is kind of expected in a flexible working environment. So in a structural one, you normally will just kind of stick to what you do, and then perhaps you don't really have to give your ideas because sometimes they they do not serve any purpose. So that's one thing about kind of uh, to be in a position where you are ready to kind of tell what you think, right? So that was something that I learned.
Yeah, I mean,
And
so I think actually, just if we can just investigate that point a little bit more,
hmm,
when you first arrived in that, in a more flexible working um, uh, workspace, yeah, how did you spend your first 3 6 months, mentally recalibrating yourself to from what was very very hierarchical, very structured, to suddenly, well, hang look,
hmm,
Leemei, we expect you to kind of contribute to solutions and this kind of thing.
hmm.
Mentally, how did you go through that journey?
Well, I have to admit that it was quite a challenge because, I felt like I was thrown in a world that I never faced before. So I really um so I think I was quite diligent in a way where I look at how people react and how people participated, and I took that and I say, okay, I think I should behave, or I should present myself in such a way because that is how everyone was doing at that point of time and in that sort of working environment. So really kind of take examples, or if there are role models and all that, really learn from them. So it was tough in a way also because I was new in the country, and then obviously the culture aspect kind of came to my mind and say, okay, so now the culture is different, obviously the work environment is different, so I kind of use that I take that perspective to actually learn about people's culture. And I felt that people are more open and people really appreciate when you voice out. And even though it may not be sort of like a solution or may not be the best idea, but you know, um, giving input is appreciated.
So
So
this
the
is this is
chat,
when you moved from Kuala Lumpur to, what, the UK or France, or where do you move at that point?
yeah, from Kuala Lumpur to UK.
Okay, so now you're facing a double kind of cultural whammy. Okay, life in KL, yeah,
Yeah.
history of Malaysia aside, obviously you have proficiency in English is required in in Malaysia. It's very useful. So coming to the UK is a little bit easier. But life in
Mhm.
London is very different to life in KL.
Yeah, very much different. It was kind of a culture shock, I would say, right? It's so that's why I say like I was in a situation where I had to learn a lot of things. So it wasn't just like a working environment. You need to learn like how people live in London, for example. So lifestyle is really different, and also the way people think is different, right? So I mean, I came from the background where the school system was different, and I mean students were not really encouraged to say, to participate, right? So, and I think generally like Asian students come across a bit shy, and then you just kind of learn, and then you just kind of absorb, and then you don't kind of give your output. So I think that basically when I was put in that work environment, I was like, hey, it's kind of scary and it's shocking, but I think that's one of the challenges. But I reminded myself, so it's a good opportunity to learn.
So how
So
would you judge the impact on your career? Because obviously at this point you've moved country, moved workplace, you're trying to push your career forward, and
mhm,
you've landed yourself with a corporate culture
mm.
challenge, a living culture challenge, but obviously you're trying to do this to improve your career. Would you say how do you judge the impact in your career in that first stretch? Was it positive, negative, or did you literally have to stand still in your career while you were adjusting and absorbing?
I think I took it in a very positive way because I personally like to learn different things, and culture aspect is something that I'm passionate about because I know in Malaysia it's multicultural, and then in the UK it's cosmopolitan, right? So it's so much bigger than in KL. So I was like, hey, I'm still curious, right? I'm really curious. I want to find out, and all this, and I during that time, um, I just had this in my head. I said, hey, you know what? Yes, it's scary, but it's a good learning point. It's really a good, kind of journey, right? So once I've gone through all the challenges, I will feel settled because now I know how things work. Um, and I look from the perspective, hey, this is gonna, make my CV looks good, right? So I have experience in Kuala Lumpur, and now for whatever number of years I work in the UK, so I've got this um experience and working perspective from the UK. So that basically I feel like it kind of opens up my horizon. So I have this in me that kept me going basically.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I'm very much the same. And having worked in Abu Dhabi for 5 years, you have to adopt these attitudes to be successful.
Yeah.
But and that's great if you're a self-starter. However, for those, so if you worked on the basis that you were not a self-starter, if you still had that kind of shy
Mm,
mindset,
mm,
if you had an external mentor available, how would that have changed your settling in or your preparation for changing country and job?
mm. I think that would change a lot because having someone, external mentor, and especially someone who is so familiar with the working environment in that particular country, and also from the cultural perspective, I think I would get invaluable advice because there were things that I found it so difficult to pick up at that point of time, which took me some time to really understand or make some assumption. Okay, that's how it works or whatever. But having an external mentor, perhaps I didn't have to go through that stretch of I would say difficult stretch of life or difficult stage of life and say, oh, if someone could tell me, this is what you need to understand, this is what it is, and then to be more well prepared, I think. So I think that would put me in a better position that I didn't have to go through that kind of stress, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you still have to go through the experience of whatever you need to do, whether it's terms of opening a bank account or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But at least you know what's coming, rather than figuring it out as literally as you're going through the process.
Exactly. And I think the pain will be half, I guess, you know. Because like perhaps the pain that I was experiencing that point of time was like 100%, but you know, having an external mentor probably will cut it into half because then I will have that information firsthand and say, hey, okay, well, you may, you know, experience this kind of situation or whatever situation, but this is, you know, what you need to understand or what you know. So it's kind of like you have that information already. Then when you're faced with that, then you're like, oh, okay, so that's fine. It's normal. I know, you know, it happens, right?
Yeah, it's a bit odd for me, but I understand it's acceptable behavior. I'm not actually going mad. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not making a mistake. It's just different to what I'm used to. So no,
Hmm.
I get that. So actually, and so as I said, having so just to recap a bit, you know, it's about you're moving through your career. You're making choices to say I
Hmm.
need to do something different, and sometimes those choices mean that you're going to move from a structured workplace to a flexible workplace. And sometimes you're going to move country. You
Hmm.
basically, it boils down to you're going to have to take on some sort of new challenge to make a step
Mm.
forward. And as
Yeah.
we know, stepping forward into new challenges can be without the appropriate level of support, you know, without, and again, it goes back to some of the things we were talking about in the first session is, you know, sometimes it's good just to have that external person there who you can run ideas past and say, you know, does this seem right? Does this feel right? Are there potential pitfalls there which I'm not seeing?
Hmm.
Um, and to that, and interesting to that point, so the
Yeah.
question to you is then, have you been in a situation where you've gone from structured to flexible? Have you
Hmm.
then gone from flexible back to structured? And how did you cope with that?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. So yes, I've experienced that as well. Now, you know, from structured to flexible, obviously, you know, it was like eye-opening, you know, there were times when I was asking myself, hey, you know, is this normal? You know, like what we had just discussed, right? So then, after like a number of years, I was like really settling into that flexible as I, you know, the work-life balance perspective, and then to be open and you know, you can kind of voice out what you think and all that. I was really comfortable after many years, and then when I went back to the structured working environment, it was a shock again. It's like, hey, how could this be? You know? So I was very comfortable. So, you know, I mean, human beings, once you are comfortable and then when you kind of switch to another one, it's like, oh wow, you know, it could be a shock or it could just be, you know, if it is something different, then you kind of feel the shock. So yeah, it was another challenge. And this time I think I was more well prepped for that because I discover well or I identify that hey, you know, there's this aspect that I'm experiencing right now. So I think it is because of the, you know, structured environment um to what I used to, you know, the more flexible environment. So it was not easy. So I had to kind of go through, you know, try to kind of prepare myself or, you know, try to kind of go with the flow and see how things go because at the end of the day, once you are in that environment and then, you know, based on the experience that you had, then it was easier in a way to kind of blend in it and then you kind of question less.
Did you survive very long back in a structured environment?
No, I didn't survive very long. In fact, I wasn't happy. So
Yeah.
so that has affected, you know, my happiness and also my fulfillment. So and I questioned myself, do I feel I really want to do this? I mean, yeah, so that was something that, you know, I questioned myself and I wasn't happy. And finally I thought, you know, happiness is more important
Okay.
than yeah.
Okay, I understand that. I do understand, you know, happiness is, you know, is the big intangible life that we have. You know, there's no point in going through life, you know, with money but utterly miserable. You know, I'd rather take happiness and you know, a bit less money and a bit less career. It's the way it is. So I'm just going to move.
Hmm.
Just going to move to the final question.
Yep.
So when people are looking to make, you know, they've been working now for 3, 4, 5 years.
Hmm.
Are there any kind of like three high level tips that you give that person when they're looking forward to saying, what do I do next?
Right. Now, I think the first thing is really, after 3 to 4 years, you kind of know, in the job that you do or in a role that you do pretty well. So some people will start to question, is this something that I want to continue doing? And then kind of, okay, that is my domain, that's my area of domain, and I want to um, stay in that area and then kind of progress like upward, right? So I think
Yep.
that's one thing that I feel like everyone needs to kind of ask this question. And if not, then what, right? So what if there is a potential or there is a desire to kind of change to another domain? Say, for example, it is say, from accounting to, I don't know, project management. So I think that is really important, but don't feel that it is impossible, because the skills and experience that one gain from, one domain, they can all be transferable. So really kind of look from that perspective, and not to put that as sort of like a barrier and say, nah, it's impossible. It's always possible if there's always, way to do it, right? So to really kind of look at that aspect, what do I know and can this be transferred? And any, new skills that I have to work towards in order to get into that. So it's continuous learning. And finally, I would say it's really important to really engage a mentor, perhaps, and a coach, right? So I know it's sometimes we get stuck, and then we don't really know what we want. There's a confusion. So really to get the experience or listen to a mentor or coach, work on the basis like, okay, I want to change career, for example, what do I need to do? And really to start looking, setting goals, long term, short term. So these are the tips that I would say, like, if someone is kind of 4 years into the job.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Leemei, and your absolute honesty and answering the questions. I know sometimes it could be a little bit, there's a little bit of vulnerability in talking about our past. But
Yeah,
I'll wrap it up and say thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you again when we go through our third podfic next week.
sure. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Simon.
Bye.
Bye.